Welcome to the UiPath Orchestrator Deep Dive.
Yeah.
Today, we're really getting into UiPath Orchestrator. You can sort of think of it as the brain, maybe, the intelligence hub for all your automations.
Yeah, brain or command center works well. It's where you manage everything your software robots are doing.
Exactly. So whether you're just, dipping your toes in or you really want to understand the nuts and bolts, we're going to explore what makes Orchestrator so key to getting automation right.
Absolutely. It's more than just a tool, isn't it? It's really the foundation if you want to scale things up.
Scale things up.
Yeah, if you're imagining like lots of robots handling lots of tasks across the business, Orchestrator is how you manage that digital workforce efficiently. It stops things from getting chaotic.
Right. It prevents chaos.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's start there. At its core, what's the main job of Orchestrator? What problem is it really solving?
The fundamental purpose is centralization, bringing all your automation resources together.
Centralization.
Instead of, robots running wild on individual machines with scattered schedules, Orchestrator gives you that single platform. Control, visibility, order, basically.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense, especially as things grow. So what are some of the key capabilities? What does it actually let you do?
Well, quite a lot, really. First off, managing and provisioning robots, setting them up, getting them connected.
Both kinds, attended and unattended.
Both kinds, yes. Though for today, we'll probably focus a bit more on unattended since they're the backbone of, automated background tasks.
Makes sense. What else?
Then there's deploying and managing the actual automation projects, the workflows you build in Studio.
Oh, so getting the code from the developer's machine into production, essentially.
Precisely. And then scheduling those automations, monitoring how they run, we call those executions jobs.
Jobs, okay.
It also handles resources they might need, things like queues for managing workloads, and assets, which are like shared variables or credentials.
Queues and assets. We'll need to dig into those.
We will. And finally, a really big one is logging and monitoring, giving you all the data you need to see what's happening, track performance, fix problems.
Visibility.
Yeah.
Sounds crucial.
It is. Without it, you're flying blind.
Okay, so it's really orchestrating that whole life cycle, like you said.
Yeah.
Control, deployment, execution, monitoring.
You got it.
Now, to keep all this organized, you mentioned tenants and folders earlier. These sound like the filing system for Orchestrator.
That's a good way to think about it. They're the core organizational structure. So a tenant. Think of a tenant as your own private, secure bubble within the Orchestrator universe.
A bubble.
Yeah, like if you have different departments, finance, HR, operations, or maybe you're managing automations for totally separate clients. Tenants keep all their stuff completely isolated. Resources, data, users, everything. Secure separation.
Okay, so the security and separation boundary, that's the tenant context.
Exactly. That isolated environment is the tenant context. And then within a tenant, you use folders.
Right, folders for finer-grained organization.
Precisely. If the tenant is the building, folders are the offices or departments inside. You can group automations, robots, queues, everything related to a specific team or project into its own folder.
So finance gets a folder, operations gets a folder, all inside the same main tenant, potentially.
That's a very common setup. It really helps structure things logically. This specific area you work in within that tenant, that's the folder context.
Got it. And I think I've heard about classic and modern folders. Is that important?
It is, yeah. Modern folders are the newer standard. They offer more flexibility, especially around managing users and robot assignments. Most people are encouraged to use modern folders now or migrate from the older classic ones.
Okay, good to know. So understanding tenants and folders is really step one for setting up a tidy, manageable environment.
Absolutely fundamental. Get that structure right and everything else becomes easier.
Okay, structure sorted. Let's talk about the workhorses, the robots. Especially unattended ones. How do we get them working with Orchestrator?
Right, unattended robots. These are the ones doing tasks without a human needing to be there. Think end-of-day processing, data migration, that sort of thing.
Right.
Provisioning them in Orchestrator means essentially creating a digital identity for that robot. You configure its settings, maybe what kind of license it uses, and then you establish a secure connection between the robot service running on a machine and your Orchestrator instance.
Like registering it for duty.
Exactly like that, giving it its credentials and access rights.
And how does that connection stay secure? How does Orchestrator trust the robot?
Good question. Security is obviously key. There's an authentication step. Often this uses something called client credentials, basically a unique ID in secret for the robot itself.
Like a username and password, but for the robot application.
Pretty much, yeah. Or in environments needing higher security, you might see things like smart card authentication being used. The point is, there's a defined, secure handshake.
Okay. And what about the credentials the robot uses, like logging into other applications as part of its job? Where do those passwords live?
Yeah, you definitely don't want those just sitting in the code. That's where Orchestrator's credential management using assets comes in, often integrated with secure vaults.
Secure vaults,
Like CyberArk, Azure Key Vault, HashiCorp Vault, AWS Secrets Manager, industry standard stuff. You store the sensitive credential, say, a password in the vault, and you create an asset in Orchestrator that points to it.
I see.
So when the robot needs the password, Orchestrator tells it to securely fetch it directly from the vault at runtime. The password itself is never exposed in Orchestrator logs or the automation code.
That sounds much, much safer. Okay, robots are provisioned, they're secure, they can get credentials safely. What do they actually run?
Processes, right.
Exactly. Processes are the workflows you design in UiPath Studio. You build your automation, test it, and then you publish it.
Publish it where?
To Orchestrator. It becomes a package stored in Orchestrator's library. Then from Orchestrator, you can deploy that package as a process to specific folders, making it available for robots assigned to that folder to run. Okay, so Studio is for building. Orchestrator is for deploying and managing the runnable version.
You've got it. Think of the process as the instruction manual for the robot.
And when a robot follows that manual, executes the process. What's that called again?
That's a job. A job is a single execution of a process by a robot.
One run.
One run. You can start jobs manually, maybe for testing or a one-off task, but the real power comes from starting them automatically using triggers.
That's okay.
And Orchestrator tracks every job you can see, if it's pending, running, if it finished successfully, or if it faulted. It gives you that real-time status.
And you mentioned something about long-running workflows.
Yeah, that's a more advanced topic, but basically Orchestrator can handle processes that might need to pause for a long time, maybe waiting for human approval or an external event, and then resume later. Useful for complex, stateful processes.
Interesting. Okay, but back to starting jobs automatically. Triggers. What kinds are there?
The two main ones you'll use are time triggers and queue triggers.
Time triggers sound straightforward, like scheduling.
Exactly. Run this job every hour or every weekday at 9 a.m. or only on the 15th of the month. You can set up simple schedules or use powerful cron expressions for really complex timing.
Cron expressions. Sounds flexible.
Very flexible. You can even specifically say, run on the last day of the month, which is super handy for financial closing processes, for example.
Right, avoids figuring out if it's the 30th or 31st.
Exactly. So that's time triggers based on the clock.
And the other kind, queue triggers.
Queue triggers are event-driven. They kick off a job when something happens, specifically when a new item arrives in an Orchestrator queue.
Okay, now we need to talk about queues properly. What are they?
Queues are, well, they're essential for managing workloads, especially when you have lots of items to process, maybe coming in at unpredictable times. Think of a queue as a list, a shared inbox holding work items.
Work items. Like,
it could be anything.
Yeah.
Invoices to process, customer support tickets, new user requests. Each individual item in the queue is called a queue item. And when a robot takes an item from the queue to work on it, that specific instance of processing is called a transaction.
queue item is the thing. Transaction is the act of processing it.
You got it. Orchestrator tracks the status of each transaction: new, in progress, failed, successful. This lets you distribute work across many robots. If one robot finishes a transaction, it can just grab the next item from the queue.
Ah, so it decouples the adding work part from the doing work part.
Precisely. Very important for building resilient and scalable automations.
And what if the robot tries to process an item, but something goes wrong?
Good point. Orchestrator helps manage exceptions. Generally, you differentiate between application exceptions.
Like the website the robot was using crashed.
Exactly, a technical issue. The system failed. Versus business exceptions.
Which are?
The robot ran fine technically, but the data itself was problematic according to the business rules. Maybe an invoice had an invalid supplier code, or the requested amount was too high.
I see. The robot did its job, but the input was wrong according to the rules.
Right. And Orchestrator lets you handle these differently. Application exceptions might mean retrying later. Business exceptions often need a human to look at the item and decide what to do.
That makes sense. Handles different failure types appropriately. Okay, so we have robots, processes, jobs, triggers, queues. What about assets? You mentioned them earlier with credentials.
Yeah, assets are broader than just credentials, though that's a key use case. Think of them as shared configuration values or variables that your automations can use.
Examples.
Maybe a URL for a web application that multiple processes need to access, or an email address for sending notifications, or configuration settings like a timeout value, and yes, credentials like API keys or usernames.
So shared stuff that might change or that you want to manage centrally.
Exactly. You create the asset in Orchestrator, give it a name and a value. Then, in your automation code, you just tell it to fetch the value of asset name.
And if that URL or email address changes,
You just update the asset value in Orchestrator in one place. All the automations using it will automatically pick up the new value next time they run.
that's much better than hard coding values everywhere.
Way better. And safer, especially for credentials when linked to those secure vaults we talked about. You can also link assets to specific folders, controlling which processes can access which assets.
Nice. Okay, one last major component, I think. Logs. Keeping track of everything.
Yep, logs. Absolutely critical for visibility and troubleshooting. Orchestrator records a lot of information.
The kind of stuff, just errors.
Oh, much more. When robots connect and disconnect, when jobs start and end, what status they finish with, messages that your automation specifically logs during its run, any errors encountered, plus audit logs of who changed what configuration in Orchestrator itself.
Wow. Okay, so it's quite detailed.
Gary, there are sort of two main categories people focus on. Orchestrator's own diagnostic logs about the health of the Orchestrator platform itself, and then the execution logs, the ones generated by the robots running your processes.
And those execution logs are what you'd use to see if an automation ran okay, or figure out why it failed.
Exactly. They're your primary tool for monitoring automation health and debugging issues. For really large deployments, you can also forward these logs to external systems like Elasticsearch for more advanced searching, dashboards, and analysis.
Right, feeding it into bigger monitoring tools.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Okay, this covers the core components really well. What about managing who can do all this stuff? Access control.
Crucial aspect. Orchestrator uses role-based access control, or RBAC.
Roles, like administrator, operator.
Precisely. You assign roles to users or groups. Each role defines a set of permissions, what they're allowed to see and do. Can they deploy processes? Can they manage robots? Can they view queues? Can they only monitor jobs?
So you can get quite granular.
Very granular. There are built-in default roles that cover common scenarios, but you can also create fully custom roles to perfectly match your organization's policies.
And this applies at different levels.
Yes, permissions can be set at the tenant level, applying broadly, and also refined at the folder level. So someone might be an administrator for the finance folder, but only have viewer rights in the operations folder.
Okay, that provides a lot of control.
It does. And related to this is managing the actual machines, the servers or virtual machines where unattended robots run. You register these machines in Orchestrator, assign them to folders.
And then link the robot accounts to those machines.
Exactly. That's the account machine mapping. It ensures the right robot accounts can run on the right authorized machines within the correct folder context. It all ties together for security and governance.
Wow, okay. It's definitely a comprehensive system. It feels like Orchestrator really is that central nervous system for UiPath automation.
That's a great way to put it. It connects everything, manages everything, monitors everything. Understanding these pieces, tenants, folders, robots, processes, jobs, triggers, queues, assets, logs, and access control is really the foundation for using it effectively.
This has been incredibly helpful, a really solid overview.
Glad to help. Once you grasp these fundamentals, you can really start leveraging Orchestrator to build and manage powerful automations.
So just to recap today's deep dive, we really covered the essentials of UiPath Orchestrator, what it is, why it's central, its main building blocks like tenants and folders.
And then the key elements for running automations. The robots themselves, the processes they execute, the jobs that represent those executions, the triggers that start them.
Plus, the supporting cast of queues for workloads, assets for shared resources, and logs for keeping track of it all, and of course, managing access.
Understanding how these components fit together is definitely the first major step towards successfully managing and, importantly, scaling your automation program with UiPath.
Okay, let's do a quick chapter overview. We started with the introduction, the why of Orchestrator, then dug into its core structure, tenants and folders. We covered managing robots, deploying processes, running jobs, and how triggers kick things off. We also looked at the role of queues, assets, and logs in making it all work smoothly and securely.
Yeah, and the key points to really take away. Remember, Orchestrator is that central control plane. It brings order. Tenants give you that crucial isolation. Folders help you organize within a tenant.
Right, and robots run the processes, started by triggers, either time-based or queue-based. Assets provide those secure shared resources.
And logs are absolutely vital for monitoring and fixing things when they go wrong. Don't underestimate the logs.
Definitely noted.
Okay.
For everyone listening, if you want to explore this further, all the links are pinned in the description. We've got links to the official UiPath documentation, relevant academy courses, which are great for hands-on learning, and other useful resources to help you continue your Orchestrator journey.